You are Locked On Buffaloes POSTCAST, powered by Mile High Sports, part of Locked On Sports Denver on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Oh, what is up, Buff Nation? Hope everyone is hanging in there out there after maybe the ugliest, most frustrating loss of the season for the Colorado Buffaloes, as they lose in pretty ugly fashion this evening to the TCU Horned Frogs. Your final score here, 35-21. And of course, Colorado in that game till the very end. I mean, it was 28-21. Looked like Colorado was going to have an opportunity to go out there and make something happen and try to send this game to overtime. And frankly, a game that had no business going to overtime in the first place. But yeah, they were just not in this game mentally tonight. Again, this is, if you're a regular listener to the postcast, and first and foremost, appreciate y'all tapping in with me. You can follow me on social media at Media by AP. Also, do me a favor, hit that like button and smash that subscribe button as well. But if you've listened to this postcast before, and I know Kevin's talked about it on the main, Locked On Buffs podcast as well, so far this season for Colorado, it has not been a question of talent. It's been a question of execution. And look, we'll talk a lot about the quarterback position tonight. Mixed bag from Caden Salter, unfortunately, more bad than good from him. The turnovers were absolutely critical. But I want to start off the show by talking a little big picture with this Colorado Buffaloes team, because again, it's not about, they're getting beat because they're playing a better team with more talent. Like, the Buffs have talent. They're just maybe playing a little bit like individuals as opposed to playing as a team. And I understand that the turnovers tonight in particular killed the Buffs, but when you have a 14-point lead in this game, you can't lose in the fashion in which the Buffs did, in the way in which the Buffs did. And obviously, like I said, we'll talk about Caden Salter here plenty. But just the muff punt there at the end. Whenever Colorado, needed to get a stop on defense, getting bailed out a couple of times by the refs, but just unable to put their foot down. And I don't want to say play championship football, because this Colorado Buffaloes team is not a championship caliber team, but play winning football. Like the games in which Colorado has won this year, they've won because of frankly, strength of opponent. I mean, you beat Delaware and you beat Wyoming, two teams that you absolutely positively should beat. But, in every, out in these handful of games now, 6 games the Buffs have played, the coin flip games are the games against quote unquote quality competition. The Buffs have been in just about every single one of them. I know the final score here tonight, 35-21, isn't really indicative of how into the game the Buffs were. Again, they had a 14-point lead at one point in this game. Georgia Tech got out to a lead in that one. 3 straight turnovers for Tech to start the game, unable to capitalize on that. Houston, right, kind of got punched in the mouth, but you fought back and then fell apart at the end of that game. BYU, in it to the very end again last week, losing 24-21. So it's not like this CU Buffs team is that far off. And if you want to put a lot of the blame, most of the blame on the quarterback, I don't blame you. I asked the question, last week with some of my media colleagues, what would the Buffs record be if Shedeur Sanders was still the quarterback? And there's probably a very good argument that they have maybe one loss, if not undefeated. So yes, a lot of this does come back down to the quarterback play. Caden Salter and Ryan Staub in that Houston game. But, it's a frustrating way to lose yet another game in which you were in against a quality opponent tonight for the Buffs. Of course, your final score here this evening, 35-21. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I see we got one little troll in here. Do you believe now? I was a guy that had the Buffs at 6 or 7 wins before the year, so I wasn't expecting CU to go out there and contend for a national championship, let alone a Big 12 championship this season, right? I thought this was going to be a bit of a gut check type of season for Coach Prime as a head coach. No Shedeur, no Travis, no Shiloh, obviously. And, he was dealing with the cancer stuff in the offseason, and I'm not using that necessarily as a talking point, but I do think it's something to factor in. I'm not going to hold Deion's medical stuff against him in regards to why the team doesn't look as good or as crisp as they should. But the reality of the situation is Deion was not there for a large portion of the offseason. And, that I'm sure factors into the product that we're seeing on the field here today. But, unfortunately for CU, it's just another brick in the wall, another game that is getting away from them that they absolutely should have won. And I think this has got to be the most frustrating loss of the year. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I look at the other losses, and Georgia Tech, right, first game of the year, you give them a little bit of a break. Georgia Tech turns out to be a pretty good team. Houston, the vibe was never really right in that game. BYU, you were in that game as well. But this is a game tonight here on October the 4th where I just think self-inflicted wounds absolutely, positively destroy the Colorado Buffaloes in this game. I see we got one, Fire Livingston comment here as well. The defense was not great tonight. And again, the thing that I go back to with the CU defense is when they needed to stop late in that game, I understand they blew the 14-point lead, but when CU needed to stop, they just could not get it. I mean, that touchdown that they gave up at the end of the game that made it 35 points for TCU is embarrassing. Wide open in the back of the end zone on a 4th and 6. Wide open. You're not going to win many games that way, folks. You're just not going to win many games. And unfortunately for the Colorado Buffaloes, as I said, this is just yet another frustrating loss. And you're going to sit back at the end of the year, regardless of where they end up. They're fighting for a bowl game right now, folks. That's where we're at with this CU team. This is the game, one of many now, one of a handful for this Colorado Buffaloes team, that you're going to sit back and say, you know what? If we could have just done this better, if we could have executed here, if we didn't turn the ball over and took better protection of the ball, probably win that game. All right, I want to do a good amount here on Caden Salter because I do think now is the time it's appropriate to start having the Juju Lewis quarterback conversation. Not saying that the season is over for CU. Look, this was going to be a tough game for them to win anyway, but when you're up 14-0 and you lose in the manner in which you did, I got to imagine that it's a bit of a deflating atmosphere in that locker room right now. And unfortunately, for better or for worse, fair or unfair, I think a lot of it is fair. I think you point the finger tonight and you wish you got a little bit more out of Caden Salter at the quarterback position. RG3 talked about it. I caught him on the post game here as I was getting ready to set up to do our show, about now the quarterback conversation becomes real once again for this Colorado Buffaloes team. For some people, it's always been real. I was one of those guys that said, let's see Caden Salter go out there and play. Thought he looked pretty good last week against BYU. I thought he was, I don't want to say sabotaged, but I think he was dealt maybe an unfair hand to start the year. But now 2 losses in a row, you cannot blame Colorado's coaching staff on putting Caden Salter in a bad position. The last 2 losses, Caden Salter straight up has not been good enough for this CU team. Straight up. So let me hit my commercial break, guys. When we come back, we'll continue along with the conversation. Really, really appreciate you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section about Caden Salter, about the quarterback position. We'll come back and we'll do just that right here on your Locked On Buffs postcast. Back in just a moment, folks. All right, you guys. And let me tell you about our friends over at DoorDash, because I might need to order some DoorDash right now. It's almost the weekend. Well, actually, it is the weekend now, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP who delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down for the Colorado Buffaloes. Obviously they lose the game here today, but a couple of fun stat lines for CU, specifically in the passing department. Omarion Miller had himself a game with 2 touchdowns, 6 receptions, and 89 yards. So we'll go with him today for DoorDash as we do this read, guys. And there's just so many different ways that you can win with DoorDash. I mean, I actually was with some buddies the other night. We didn't want to go out. We ended up ordering some DoorDash. I mean, there is awesome perks, awesome advantages, including those streaks that you can take advantage of with our friends over at DoorDash. So sometimes you don't want to get off the couch. Sometimes you want to just sit back, relax, watch college football, playoff baseball. Our friends over at DoorDash are going to have you covered. Be sure to check them out and let them know that Locked On Buffs sent you. And let me also tell you about our friends over at FanDuel, guys, because the NFL season is here and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. It makes watching football so much more exciting when you've got a little something on the game. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Just visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. And last but certainly not least, let me tell you about our friends over at Mazda, because this episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. Unfortunately for the Buffs, the turnovers is something you're going to remember about this game, but it ultimately helped drive TCU to victory. But, if you want to drive in style, that's what our friends over at Mazda are here for. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like that, there's more to every highlight. There's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Be sure to check out our friends over at Mazda and let them know that Locked On Buffs sent you. All right, welcome on back into your Locked On Buffs postcast. Hope everyone is hanging in there out there. Do me a favor, if you're watching live on YouTube, Appreciate y'all. Do me a favor, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button as well. That way you guys never, ever miss an episode of your Locked On Buffs postcast. Obviously, a frustrating loss for CU here tonight. 35-21, missed opportunities, self-inflicted wounds. I mean, you're just not going to win many games when you have 4 turnovers, folks. That's just the reality situation right now. I mean, the team stats across the board were relatively similar, right? TCU had 23 first downs compared to 20 for CU. 369 yards of total offense for TCU and 343 yards for CU. There's just no reason as to why CU should have lost this game. They won the time of possession battle. They won the penalty battle as well. 6 for CU compared to 7 for TCU. They outrushed TCU 126-94. And, again, the passing stats were pretty similar as well. Where this game comes down to is not good enough play from quarterback and self-inflicted wounds, the muff punt, and, of course, a couple of terrible turnovers from Kaidon Salter throughout the course of this game. And let's have that conversation now, because Salter, not great tonight. 18 for 29, 217 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, which you like, but not when you've got 3 interceptions to go along with it. And, again, it's not like he's devoid of talent. Dallin Hayden, 9 carries for 61 yards tonight. You like that. Michael Welch added 12 for 40 as well. So they got some variety from the backfield tonight. Amarion Miller did his best, put out his best performance tonight. 6 receptions for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he did his part. And then after that, it was a bit lackluster from the Buffs wide receiver room. Almost said the Broncos there. Maybe that's going to be the case tomorrow against Philadelphia. But, like Sincere Brown, a guy who absolutely lit the world up on fire the first handful of weeks of college football when he got the ball, only 1 reception for 17 yards today. I mean, that's just not going to cut it. Joseph Williams, 2 for 22. And, Draylon Miller, a guy that, was dynamic out of the backfield for CU last week against BYU. You only get 1 reception for 6 yards. These are all just frustrating things that are going to continue to compile. And ultimately, you're going to point the finger at Kaidon Salter. And let's see here. We got a couple of comments. I don't want to read all the negative ones, but yeah, here we go. 3 turnovers in the first half is crazy. Skimming the ball over a defender's head so they can pick and knock the ball down. Yeah, I mean, just not great throws, not high-level IQ throws, and just high IQ play from Kaidon Salter. I mean, some of those turnovers are just absolutely mind-numbing, absolutely mind-numbing. And so, here's another one. We definitely should have won that game. We even got some help from the refs, shaking my head 100%. I mean, you got bailed out there on that 4th down play from TCU there late in the 4th quarter. And, just to see it, like Colorado, even in the 2-minute drill and some of these late game scenarios, and really just over the course of the game, they were able to get some chunk plays. They were able to move the ball, but unable to put the nail in the coffin and keep their foot on the gas. So again, it's one thing if Colorado loses this game 35-21 and they score the 21 points all in the second half, and they put up some points late and, it was over in the second half type game. No, that was not the case. Colorado had a 14-point lead in this game and messed it up. Obviously, a brutal punt there from Damon Graves at the end as well. Opportunity to try to pin TCU back. And I know that TCU ends up scoring that touchdown late as well, but that changes the entire dynamic of the game as well. Just self-inflicted wound after self-inflicted wound after self-inflicted wound, crushing the Colorado Buffaloes in this game. Crushing. So where do they go from here? Because now at 2-4, 6 games into your year, and looking at the schedule, you feel decent about their chances to go to West Virginia and get a win. Utah's always been a thorn in their side. They've got, Iowa State next week. That's obviously not an easy game. The 14th ranked team in the country. Arizona State's still on your schedule. I mean, I'm looking for the Buffs to get to a bowl game at this point, folks. And that's where, I think Kaidon Salter's had his chances. And, Kaidon Salter's a 5th-year quarterback, doesn't have a future in college football after this year. We'll see what happens with Coach Prime, long-term and whatnot. I don't think he's going anywhere. But, at what point do the Buffs start thinking towards next year? It's unfortunate to have that conversation right now on Saturday, October the 4th. But, the Big 12 championship, all that kind of stuff seems to be, very distant now in the rearview mirror. And you've got a quarterback in Juju Lewis, who was the number 2 rated high school quarterback coming out of the high school ranks last year. You want to keep him happy. You want to keep him engaged. You want to keep him around. And so, obviously winning is going to be, priority number 1 for Coach Prime, even though you haven't really seen it after 2 consecutive losses now to BYU and TCU. But what is the upside in playing Kaidon Salter moving forward for this Colorado Buffaloes team? Because again, it's not a question of talent. It's not a question of talent. So we'll see. What do you guys think? You think they should go with Juju Lewis moving forward? Do they go back to Ryan Staub? I don't think they go down that route. I do think it's Salter, Juju, or bust at that point. And, we'll see if Colorado can try to get back on track and play spoiler next week against Iowa State. 1:30 p.m. kickoff Mountain Time here in Colorado. Back at home. But now, 2 consecutive losses for Colorado, 2 ugly losses in a row for CU, 2 games in which they should have won. That's where we're at, folks. See, we got one here. Juju isn't ready. He should be a senior in high school. I agree. Got another one saying baptism by fire for Juju Lewis. We'll see what direction they want to go here, but it just feels like what you have with Kaidon Salter, and it feels like that's just kind of leading to a dead end right now with this CU Buffs team. What the ceiling is with them with Kaidon Salter. We've seen that. I don't know how much longer. It's one thing if Kaidon Salter has another year left, right, and it's growing pains, but he doesn't have anything after this year. So we'll see. At the end of the day, it's a 35-21 loss for CU. On to Iowa State next week. See if they can clean up the turnovers. See if we figure out the quarterback situation. But CU is now 2-4 after an ugly self-inflicted loss to TCU. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. Of course, this is your Locked On Buffs postcast. Really appreciate y'all. Kevin's going to have his standard Locked On Buffs podcast along the way here shortly, I would imagine. So do me a favor on your way out, hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. You guys can also check me out on social at Media by AP. Got the Broncos postcast tomorrow. That should be a good game for any of you Broncos fans out there going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. But for tonight, that's all she wrote, folks. Ugly loss. See if the Buffs bounce back. Have a good night. We'll talk to you guys next week.